The door slammed behind me, the sound of it echoing through the empty house. It felt like the world had just stopped. My heart, heavy with disbelief, sank to the pit of my stomach as I stood there, frozen. In front of me, all of our years together, every memory, every shared dream, disintegrated into a single harsh reality. He was gone. My fingers trembled as I glanced down at the paper in my hand. The envelope was cold, but it burned through my skin like fire. The letter, the one he had left behind. The one that confirmed what I had refused to believe. The one that had been shoved in my face, forcing me to confront the truth. His words jumped off the page with a cruel precision. "I'm leaving. You will not hear from me again." He had taken everything, the house, the money, everything we had built together, gone in an instant. The business I helped him grow, the family I believed we were, crumbled under his decision. It wasn't just the material things, it was the years I had invested, the years I thought we shared. I had given him my trust, my love, my everything, but none of that mattered, not anymore. I forced myself to sit down on the nearest chair, my hands still shaking as I reread the letter. There was no explanation, no remorse, just cold indifference. And as I read, I could feel the sting of betrayal tearing through me with every word. His departure wasn't just a choice, it was a calculated decision to walk away from everything we had. He had planned this, and now there was nothing left but the bitter taste of abandonment. How long had he been planning this? Had it been months? Years? The thoughts ravaged my mind as I stared at the letter, at the words that felt like poison seeping into my soul. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to demand answers. But the truth was, I already knew the answer. He had never loved me, not the way I had loved him. It hit me like a ton of bricks. All the years of false promises, the empty assurances, everything that had felt real had been a lie. A well-crafted lie that had slowly eaten away at the foundation of our life together. I stood up suddenly, the anger flooding in like a tidal wave. I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred with tears, but I refused to let them fall. Not now. Not when I had been made a fool of. The sound of a car door slamming shut outside pulled me from my thoughts, and I rushed to the window, praying that I was wrong, that he hadn't left. But the driveway was empty. He was gone, and I was left with nothing but his cold, heartless words. I wanted to believe that it was a nightmare, that I would wake up from this and everything would return to normal. But I knew better now. This wasn't a dream. It was my reality. And as I stared at the empty house, the silence ringing in my ears, I knew that this moment, this betrayal, would change everything. It was the beginning of something I could never have predicted. The weight of it all crushed me, and yet I felt something stirring inside me. A spark, a fire, a need for something more than just pain. Something that would make him feel every ounce of betrayal that I felt. But that would come later. For now, I had to make sense of what had just happened. But as I stood there, alone in the quiet, I made one vow to myself. He would pay for this. He would regret the day he ever thought he could take everything from me and walk away unscathed. The first chapter of this story was over, but the next chapter, the one where I made him feel my pain, was just beginning. I could already feel it building within me, like a storm on the horizon, waiting for the right moment to strike. And when that moment came, he would have no idea what hit him. We were perfect, or so I thought, the kind of couple others envied. Our friends called us a power couple, the kind you saw on magazine covers, the ones who seemed to have it all. And maybe we did, at least on the surface. But beneath the glossy exterior there were cracks. Tiny, almost imperceptible at first, but they were there. He was charming, always the center of attention. A smile that could melt the hardest of hearts, eyes that sparkled with a confidence that drew people in. To me, he was everything. I watched him grow from someone with big dreams into a man who took charge, building his empire from nothing. Together, we were unstoppable, or so I believed. The house was ours, this old yet beautiful place. We had spent weekends fixing it up, painting the walls, and designing rooms that would make any home magazine proud. It felt like a dream, living in this perfect little bubble we had created together. We even had a business we ran side by side, our success, our joint venture. He would pitch the ideas, I would execute them. I always admired his vision. It was what drew me to him in the first place. But looking back, I can see the signs. At first, they were subtle, small shifts in behavior that I convinced myself were nothing. He was busy with work and stressed with deadlines. He wasn't ignoring me, just focused, as any successful man should be. I made excuses for him, telling myself that his stress wasn't a reflection of his feelings for me. He had his moments of warmth, of tenderness, and that was enough to silence my growing doubts. He loved me, didn't he? But then there were the late nights. The unexpected business trips seemed to extend longer than planned. The strange phone calls that he would quickly dismiss when I walked into the room. I told myself I was just being paranoid, that I was overthinking it. He had always been so affectionate when he was home, his arms wrapped around me like I was the only person in the world who mattered. He always made time for us, didn't he? It wasn't until I found the messages that everything shifted. They were hidden in his phone, buried beneath layers of excuses and apologies I had never asked for. The conversation was innocent at first glance, but when I read the words between the lines, the truth became undeniable. The woman on the other end, the one he spoke to in whispers when he thought I wasn't listening, was more than just a friend. I didn't confront him then. I couldn't. The idea of it seemed too much to bear. I tried to rationalize it, to tell myself that there must be some mistake, that I had misunderstood. But the longer I tried to ignore it, the more everything began to unravel. I thought about the little things, how his smiles no longer reached his eyes, how his touch felt different, colder. The way his affection had started to feel more like a performance than something real. The way he avoided eye contact when I asked about his day always brushed me off with vague answers. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. One night, I confronted him. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a huge blowout. It was simple. Just a question softly asked but full of everything I had been hiding inside. Are you seeing someone else? For a moment he said nothing, and that silence was deafening. He looked at me, his face unreadable. His lips parted as though he was going to speak, but then he just shook his head. No, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. It's just stress. You know how things have been at work. I wanted to believe him. I did, but I didn't. Something in me had shifted. That trust I had once given so freely was gone, replaced by a gnawing doubt that wouldn't let go. Still, I stayed. We continued on as if everything was normal. I put on a smile, cooked dinner, and pretended to laugh at his jokes, even though my mind was consumed with suspicion. I could feel the distance growing between us, but I couldn't bear the thought of losing everything we had built. So, I stayed in the lie. But that night, the night I found the letter, everything came crashing down. I had been foolish and naive, thinking that love was enough, but it wasn't. Not when trust had been shattered. Not when the cracks had been there all along, and I had refused to see them. As I stood there, holding the letter in my hands, I realized just how deeply I had been deceived. The years we had spent together, the dreams we shared, the love I had given, had been nothing more than a game to him. And yet I still couldn't let go. I couldn't erase the memories, the moments of tenderness, the way he used to look at me like I was the center of his world. I didn't know what had changed, what had broken inside him, but the truth was clear now. I had been living in a dream, and it had all been shattered. The man I had trusted, the man I had loved, had never been who I thought he was. He had taken everything I had given him, and left me with nothing but a hollow shell of a life I no longer recognized. The life we had built together was nothing more than an illusion. And in that moment, as the weight of the betrayal settled in, I knew one thing for sure. He had to pay for this. I stood in the empty house, feeling its coldness seep into my bones. The silence was unbearable, deafening. The walls, once filled with laughter and warmth, now felt like a prison. Every corner seemed to whisper the same truth. He was gone. And everything I had given him, everything I had trusted him with, was gone with him. The pain hit me in waves. It was not just the loss of him, but the realization that I had been so blind. I thought I knew him. I thought I understood his every move, every thought, every desire. But I had been wrong. The betrayal wasn't just the act of him leaving. It was the lie, the years of deception that had led up to this moment. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't even breathe without feeling the weight of it. Every day felt like a battle, a struggle to keep moving, to keep pretending that I was okay, but I wasn't. I was dying inside, torn apart by the overwhelming sense of loss and betrayal that gripped my heart. How could he do this to me? How could he throw everything away like it meant nothing? The days dragged on. I went through the motions, work, errands, pretending to be a normal person, but inside, I was breaking. Every interaction felt like a mask, a performance. I could see the sympathy in the eyes of my friends and family, but they didn't know the truth. They didn't know the depth of the pain I was feeling, the way it crushed me to see my reflection in the mirror, knowing that I was no longer the person I once was. It wasn't just the material loss, though that was certainly significant. It was the emotional devastation. The trust I had placed in him was gone, and with it, a part of me. I had given him my heart, my loyalty, my everything, and in return, he had taken it and walked away without a second thought. I remember one night sitting in the dark, the weight of everything pressing down on me. The house was quiet, too quiet, and the loneliness was suffocating. I could still hear his voice in my head, still see the way his eyes looked at me with that glimmer of affection that now seemed so hollow. I didn't know what hurt more, the fact that he had lied to me or the realization that I had allowed myself to believe in him for so long. The anger started to grow. It started as a flicker, a tiny spark deep inside me. But it didn't take long before it began to consume me, spreading like wildfire, burning away the last remnants of my self-doubt. How dare he? How dare he do this to me, to us? I wasn't just angry at him. I was angry at myself for not seeing the signs, for not trusting my instincts, for being so foolish. I had let him take everything, and now I was left with nothing but a shattered heart and a life that felt like it had been ripped apart. But with the anger came something else, a sense of clarity. It was like a switch had been flipped, and I could see everything for what it was. I wasn't going to sit here and wallow in my pain. I wasn't going to let him get away with this. He was going to regret the day he ever crossed me. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my power. It was about showing him that he had made a grave mistake, that he could take everything from me, but he could never take my spirit. I started planning, but not in the way he expected. I wasn't going to confront him directly, not yet. No, I was going to play the long game. I was going to make sure that he knew, beyond any doubt, that his betrayal would not go unpunished. It started with small steps. I gathered the evidence, text messages, bank records, everything I could find that would prove his lies. Every scrap of information I uncovered made my blood boil, but it also made me stronger. I was not powerless. I was not helpless. I had control, and I was going to use it. But the deeper I dug, the more I realized something that shook me to my core. He had planned this. Every move he made, every word he spoke, had been part of a carefully orchestrated scheme. He had lied to me for so long, convincing me that everything was fine, that we were fine. And now, as I pieced together the fragments of the past, I saw the truth that had been right in front of me the entire time. His betrayal wasn't an accident. It wasn't a moment of weakness. It was intentional. He had chosen to deceive me, to use me, to take everything I had to offer and then discard me like I meant nothing. And that realization that he had never cared about me the way I had cared about him was the turning point. It wasn't just the anger that fueled me anymore. It was something deeper, something more personal. It was the need for justice, for retribution, for the satisfaction of knowing that he would never get away with this. I began to plot his downfall, quietly, methodically. Every move I made was calculated. Every step I took was one closer to making him pay. I wasn't going to be the victim anymore. I wasn't going to let him think that he could walk away without consequence. The pain had driven me to this point. The betrayal had broken me, but it had also forged something stronger in its place. A woman who would no longer be silenced. A woman who would not rest until she had reclaimed everything she had lost. And as the pieces of my plan fell into place, I could already feel the excitement building. I could already see his downfall in my mind, the moment when he would realize just how deeply he had underestimated me. But for now, I waited. I waited, biding my time, knowing that the perfect moment would come, the moment when he would realize, far too late, that the woman he had betrayed was not someone to be taken lightly. And when that moment arrived, I would make sure he felt every ounce of the pain he had caused me, every ounce of the betrayal he had inflicted on my soul. The first step was always the hardest, but once I took that step, there was no going back. My mind, once clouded with grief and confusion, had cleared. I was no longer the woman who sat in the dark, drowning in sorrow. No, I had become something else, a strategist, a woman on a mission. I knew what I needed to do, and the thought of revenge was no longer an impulse. It was a carefully planned course of action. I had spent enough time licking my wounds, crying over the past. Now I was focused. The rage that had once been an uncontrollable wildfire was now a simmering, methodical burn. I began by collecting every piece of evidence, every scrap of information I could find. His phone, his emails, his social media accounts, all became fair game. I knew the man I had loved inside and out, his habits, his weaknesses. I knew where to look, and when I did, the truth was waiting for me. Text messages to other women, financial records that didn't add up. Lies upon lies, built upon a foundation of betrayal. It was all there. I had found the proof, and now I would use it to destroy him. But I wasn't going to do it all at once. That would be too easy. No, I was going to make him suffer, slowly, methodically. The first thing I did was get in touch with his business partners. I knew he was heavily involved in the company they had built together, the one I had helped him with. They trusted him and believed in him, just as I once had. But what they didn't know, what no one knew, was that their trust was built on lies. I made sure the evidence was clear. I didn't tell them everything at first. I simply made them aware of the discrepancies in his behavior and the financial irregularities that he had hidden from everyone. I watched the fallout with a cold satisfaction. I didn't have to say a word. The partners began to ask questions and confront him. And with each passing day, his grip on his empire, his life, started to slip away. It was only the beginning, but already I could feel the power shift. But that wasn't enough. I knew he had more. His wealth, his reputation. I wasn't going to let him escape with just the loss of his business. I needed to dismantle everything, every piece of his carefully constructed world, and I was going to do it from the shadows. I started with his reputation. The public image he had so carefully curated was built on lies, and now I was going to expose them. I reached out to people from his past, friends, colleagues, anyone who could provide a glimpse into the man he was. I knew they had their stories, their secrets, their own experiences with him that didn't align with the man he had become. It wasn't difficult. People are always eager to share the truth when they realize it will cost someone like him everything. Slowly, I started to leak the stories, his treatment of others, his manipulation of the people closest to him. I made sure the right people knew, making the information spread like wildfire. And as the rumors began to surface, so did the cracks in his perfect image. At first, he fought back. He tried to deny it all, tried to control the narrative, but he couldn't. The truth had its power, and once it started to spread, it couldn't be stopped. People began to question him, to doubt him, and eventually, those doubts turned into distrust. His business partners, his clients, even his friends, they all started to pull away. The very people who had once supported him, who had once believed in his every word, began to see him for what he truly was. A liar, a cheat, a man who would sacrifice anyone for his gain. And as I watched his world crumble, I could feel the satisfaction building inside me. But I wasn't done yet. I still had a few more moves to make. I needed to hurt him on a deeper level. I needed to remind him that I had been the one he had discarded, the one he had taken for granted, the woman he thought he could walk away from. I decided to hit him where it would hurt the most, his finances. I knew exactly how much he valued money, power, and control. It was his driving force, the thing he had built his entire life around. And I was going to take it all from him. I hired a private investigator. He had connections, resources, and access to information that would take me too long to obtain on my own. Together, we dug deeper into his financials. Tax records, hidden accounts, offshore investments. We found everything. The money he had been hiding. The money he had stolen. The money he had stolen. And I made sure the right people in positions of power, knew where to look. I watched as the government's tax investigators came after him. I saw his face when he realized he couldn't hide anymore. The panic in his eyes was a sight I would never forget. The realization that his empire, the very thing he had built from the ground up, was slipping through his fingers, and it was all because of me. The walls were closing in on him. He was losing everything, and there was nothing he could do about it. The man who had once been so confident, so sure of his place in the world, was now a shell of himself. But I didn't take pleasure in his suffering, not in the way most would think. It wasn't about seeing him in pain for the sake of it. It was about knowing that justice was being served. It was about taking back what he had stolen from me, piece by piece. It was about making him feel every ounce of the betrayal he had put me through. And as I watched his world begin to crumble, as I watched him sink deeper into the hole he had dug for himself, I knew one thing for certain. He would never be the man he once was. The power was mine now. And I would make sure that when he looked back, when he realized what had happened, he would know without a shadow of a doubt that I had been the one who had brought him down. The woman he had thought he could walk away from. The woman he had betrayed. It had all led to this moment. The pieces were in place and there was no turning back. He didn't know it yet, but his downfall was inevitable. I could feel the tension in the air as I watched him from afar, his world unraveling slowly, painfully. The first signs of his panic were subtle: an anxious glance, a tightening of his jaw, the way he couldn't quite mask the sweat on his brow. But I could see it clearly. The walls were closing in, and he knew it. His once perfect empire, the life he had so carefully constructed, was disintegrating before his eyes. His business partners had begun to ask the hard questions, the ones that cut through the lies he had woven. The cracks in his reputation were now wide enough for everyone to see. The investors were pulling out, the deals were falling apart, and his phone calls went unanswered. He had underestimated me. He had thought that his charm, his control, would keep him safe, but I had exposed him for the fraud he was. Every step of his downfall was part of the plan I had set into motion. I watched him as he tried to salvage what little was left of his reputation, his business, his life. I could see the frustration in his eyes as he realized that nothing at all was in his control anymore. The people who once admired him now whispered behind his back, their trust shattered beyond repair, and all of it, every ounce of his suffering, was the result of my actions. He tried to fight back, of course. He called in favors, made threats, and did everything he could to stem the tide of his destruction. But it was too late. He had already lost. His efforts were futile, as if trying to stop a flood with his bare hands. I had taken everything he held dear, piece by piece, and now, as he sat in his office, staring at the mess he had created, I could feel the satisfaction course through me. But there was more to be done. I wasn't finished yet. I had one final move to make, the one that would bring it all crashing down. I made one last call to his business partners, the ones who had been watching him closely, waiting for the right moment. I knew they were just as disgusted by him as I was. I knew they had their doubts, their suspicions. And now I fed them the final piece of the puzzle, the hidden accounts, the falsified records. The evidence proved without a doubt that he had been embezzling from the company, that he had used them all for his gain. The documents were delivered, and the weight of the truth came crashing down on him like a ton of bricks. The phone calls started coming in immediately. The partners were furious, livid at the betrayal. But it wasn't just them. He had made enemies of everyone he had ever crossed. The legal teams were called in, and soon enough, the authorities were knocking on his door. His empire, his wealth, everything he had built with manipulation and lies was now being dismantled piece by piece. He tried to salvage what he could, but it was too late. The press picked up the story, the headlines splashed across every newspaper. Business mogul exposed for fraud and deception. His name, once revered, was now synonymous with disgrace. And as I sat back and watched it unfold, a wave of satisfaction washed over me. I had done it. He had been brought down, not by force, but by the truth. He would lose everything: his money, his power, his reputation. The betrayal he had inflicted on me, on everyone around him, had finally caught up with him. And in that moment, as I saw the last of his illusions crumble, I knew that he would never be the man he had once been. He would never again control the world the way he once had. And he would never forget the woman who had brought him to his knees. The final blow came swiftly. He was arrested on charges of fraud, embezzlement, and a string of other crimes that had been waiting to be uncovered. The world that had once bowed to him now turned its back. He had been exposed, and there was nothing left. And as he sat there, helpless, watching everything slip away, I could finally breathe. The satisfaction of revenge, the feeling of justice being served, was sweeter than anything I could have imagined. He had made the mistake of thinking he could walk away without consequence, and now, as I looked at him from afar, I could see the regret in his eyes. But it was too late. It was over. The storm I had set in motion had subsided, and the wreckage was all around him. His life, the one he had spent so long building, was reduced to ashes. The empire he had worked so hard to create had crumbled under the weight of his lies. There was no more running, no more hiding. He had lost everything. As I watched him from a distance, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over me. It wasn't just the satisfaction of seeing him pay for his betrayal. It was the realization that I had taken back my power. The woman who had once been broken, who had once been discarded, was now stronger than she had ever been. The final twist came when I received the last piece of the puzzle. His confession. It had come too late after everything had already been taken from him. In a final act of desperation, he had tried to reach out, to apologize, to beg for forgiveness. But it didn't matter. The damage was done. As I looked at the space he had left behind, I knew that this story was over. But there would always be a part of me that would remember the man who had betrayed me, and how I had made him regret it. If you enjoyed this story, like and subscribe for more. Don't miss out on future stories of betrayal and revenge.